Hello peoples! You saw the thumbnail, you know what you clicked on. This is a shell video where I get a shell that somebody else made and I make it into a home. If you've been here before, you've seen me do this. This is the 6th one that I have done. This is from an old sim server that I was a part of many years ago. The server does not exist anymore and this is the last shell from that server. So from now on, I'll have to figure out something else to do because all of the old footage that I had from those shells are finished. This is the last one. This one was done at the end of January of 2022, so that was 4 years ago. A long time has passed, but it is now seeing the light of day. This build took me about 5 hours to make in total over a course of a couple of days. And this shell also came with a very special rule. If you're new here and you have never heard of shell challenges before, a shell challenge is when somebody else makes a build with like just basically walls and stuff like that, and you have to figure out how to furnish it, how to turn it into an actual build, and you cannot touch the walls at all. You are only basically supposed to furnish it as if you had like received a house. You can't really change where the walls are, you can't expand rooms, it's just wallpapers, decorations, furniture, that kind of stuff. But as I mentioned, this one came with a special rule, and that is to not touch any of the platforms. This build came with its own platforms, and obviously it's the floor, so don't touch the floor basically. Obviously, as you see here on the video, it looks like we've got an old factory or something like that. I did my best to make it into a livable place, so I had to come up with who even would live in a place like this. My idea is that it probably got repurposed by like a white environmentally conscious couple. You can imagine like they're not necessarily middle class, but they really care about the environment, they really care about making an impact, and they got a good deal on this abandoned factory and decided to make it into their own little nature in the middle of chaos basically. At least that's what I think. Now you'll notice when I'm making this build that I put basically a bunch of random stuff down, like not good looking stuff, and if you've seen my videos before, you know that this is my procedure. I go first with just random stuff so I know where things go, like where's the living room, where's the dining room, how much space do I have for like a bedroom, and then afterwards I will go back and change it to the nice looking furniture. This is just placeholders, just so that I have a better idea of how much space I have to work with. You will also notice that there's a ton of windows in this build, and finding windows for every place of this house was not easy. I didn't want everything to look exactly the same, but I also wanted things to look, you know, coherent. And some of those windows that like kind of pop off the walls, you know, they just jet out way too much and they look kind of weird. I don't know how to explain it, but you know, they're not flush to the wall, they have like protrusions, I guess, and I thought they would look pretty cool because the building is very much a rectangle, so having some kind of window that has like extra material to it I thought would look kind of nice on the building, but I ended up not using that many of them because they just looked kind of weird. I also placed this house down specifically in the polluted region of the Evergreen Harbor world, the eco lifestyle world. I did that on purpose because like since it's supposed to be an old abandoned factory, it makes sense for the shell to be placed there. That's where all the other factories are, that's where most of the pollution is. An old factory definitely belongs there, and this couple just decided to make it into their home, but this isn't really a residential area. The couple that lives there, they wanted to make a change in their community, so they took this opportunity to maybe turn this polluted area into something a little bit more green. When I uploaded this build onto Discord after I had finished it, you know, to show the server what I had done, some people said that the pool was probably really dangerous, like, oh, this is like a radioactive pool. But in my imagination, the pool came later. This pool wasn't there during the time that the factory was active. I think that the couple added this pool later to the property when they bought it. So don't worry, it's not there is no problem in swimming in this pool. It is not radioactive. It does not have weird chemicals in it. It's totally fine. I know that having a pool there also doesn't really make that much sense, but like it's a big lot and I needed to fill up all of that space, so pool it is. Pool takes up a lot of space in the lot. One of the problems that I had with this build, it's not really a problem, but I had problems with coffee tables. I think I have had problems with coffee tables before. If not coffee tables, then definitely nightstands. Oh, I've had problems with nightstands before for sure. And it's the same problem with coffee tables. They're either way too big or way too small. They're just too chunky. And as you see there in the living room, the space that I had was very narrow. So I needed enough space in between the couch, the coffee table, and the fireplace. So I ended up having to size down the coffee table that I did end up choosing because there was just nothing small enough to fit in that space. The Sims definitely would not be able to get to the couch if I had just used the normal sized coffee table. In regards to the kitchen, I think it looks pretty fancy, but in reality, it would probably be a very inconvenient kitchen because I'm pretty sure you've heard about the kitchen work triangle. It's this thing about having this triangle that connects the sink to the fridge to the oven. And there's different ways of structuring out this triangle, but the smaller this triangle, usually the easier it is to maneuver around it. In this kitchen, the kitchen work triangle is super wide. You would have to walk pretty far between the fridge, the sink, and the stove. And actually, a little story time, I did live in a house with almost this exact same design. It was just slightly narrower, like just barely. And I would have like problems when we were making pasta, for example. You know, pasta's hot, just finished on the stove, and you have to dump out all the water. And you have to walk around carrying this steaming hot pan of pasta all the way to the sink. Chances of dropping it are large. If the walking distance from the sink to the stove was shorter, it wouldn't have felt like such a dangerous mission. But it did feel like that. And my mom and I would always complain about the damn architect who built that house, that he's definitely not a woman, he doesn't know what he's doing. Because it also looked like a really fancy kitchen because it looked really spacious, but that space was not very well utilized. It's just a lot more walking space. I ended up doing the same thing with this kitchen here, but I couldn't change the walls, so I couldn't make the kitchen a little bit less wide. So sorry about that, the couple who lives here. Also, you probably noticed in my other builds that I usually have a breakfast nook and a dining room. So I usually end up having two separate tables. I like adding breakfast nooks to my builds because, think about it, you don't usually eat your meals at the dining table in the dining room. So it's nice to have a more intimate place to share meals with your family. A smaller table with less amount of chairs where you're closer to your family. You're obviously also closer to the kitchen, or maybe it's inside the kitchen, I don't know. It's just nice to not have to eat all of your meals at the dining table, at least in my opinion. Now, when I did this shell, kids had just become a thing. Can you imagine? How many kids do we have now? I don't even know anymore how many kids we have, but back then in 2022, beginning of 2022, I think we had maybe 4 kids. Anyways, they had just started. And I was actually really excited to be able to use the industrial loft kit because I hadn't actually been able to use it before because none of my builds that I had done during that time period fit into that theme, you know, the industrial theme. And what better build to use it in than a previously abandoned factory? If that's not industrial, I don't know what is. Here's a little side note as well from me. I don't usually like putting beds up against the window. I think it's not the best place for a bed, and this is also from my lived experience. If you have curtains, the wind will be blowing the curtains on top of you, especially at night. The breeze goes straight on your head, so your head's always cold, and you can't keep the window open when it rains because the rain will literally be falling on top of your head. If the window is in a different place, not directly on top of your bed, you might even be able to leave the windows open while it's raining because like the damage might not be that much. It's just my personal preference. I don't like having beds right up against windows. That's just me. You might disagree with me, and that is okay. And speaking about windows, this reminds me of the windows that I was introduced to in Turkey when I was living there. And I really like those windows. I really don't know how to explain this without using my hands. I probably should have done a face cam for this video, but I just wasn't up to it today. But the windows that I saw in Turkey had a like double mechanism. You know when you swivel open a window, like it goes from side to side, like you pull the window towards you and it opens vertically, hot dog style, if that makes any sense. The windows there had the other option where they would swivel down, hamburger style. So you could either open the windows from the side or you could open it from the top. So if you wanted to have like a lots of breeze in your house without having the window completely open to like insects and without having to have your window like slamming with the wind, you would open up the window from the top. So you would just be getting like a slight amount of breeze. I really don't know how to explain this. I'll probably put some pictures here so that you will be able to understand. And I'm not sure what other countries have these kinds of windows because the US does not have it, Brazil does not have it, and from other countries that I've gone to, like for traveling purposes, I have not seen those windows. Maybe in other countries in Europe, but yeah, they have it in Turkey. And I wish it was more popular. One more thing about building in The Sims is the bookcases from the Dream Home Decorator. Since they're customizable, they are really versatile. You can make them as big as you want, you can put them anywhere on the wall, and I think they're really handy, and I really liked using them in this build in specific because it just gives you a lot of liberty. You can make it as tall as you want, as wide as you want, and you can just make it as customizable as you want. So I definitely recommend, I think I have recommended the Dream Home Decorator kit before in another of my builds, but for building specifically, I really love the Dream Home Decorator. I really appreciate this pack. I actually haven't played with the career that comes with it. I spend most of my time in The Sims in the build mode, so I don't really know much about the career itself. I've heard that it's glitchy or stuff like that, but for the building aspect, I definitely recommend it. You might have noticed as well a strange kind of hole in the ceiling of this shell. I did not make it. It came like that. The person who built this shell did that on purpose, and it did take me some time to figure out what I was going to do with that strip of the ceiling that's just not there. So I ended up doing kind of a sunroof and kind of like a planter box situation. It was really difficult to execute that because it's coming from basically the second story, but in that place there was no second story and I needed to clip through to the first floor. Anyways, I ended up having to speed up this part of the video even more than the rest of the footage. So what you're seeing of me putting the hanging plants, it is like really sped up, you have no idea. I think it ended up looking pretty nice. Now, I don't want to think too much about the realness of it or the practicality of it and all of the upkeep. Let's just keep it like that. It looks nice. I think it feels very naturey, and yeah, let's just keep it at that. Also, I know it is a bit of a safety hazard to have the grill area like that with no protection and no railing. But also in this situation, just use your imagination. It looks nice, it's a cute idea, you get to be exposed to the outside. I honestly didn't know at all what I should do with those 3 chimneys that are a part of this shell. There isn't space for anything in there really, except for growing plants. That's why I tried putting some planters in there at first. But I think what I ended up doing in the end with those crawling plants, I think it ended up looking nice. It's a really nice touch, and I think it reflects the personality of the imaginary couple that lives in this abandoned factory. They obviously love plants and they want to make their space greener, as you see in all the other plants that I added in this build, both inside and out. They want to bring change to their local environment. I don't think they're those kind of people who want to like revolutionize the world. They just want to make their own space and for the people around them a safe place and make changes possible in their lives. In my brain also, they probably had a lot of these plants already before they moved to this factory, but now they have the space for all of these plants, and now they have space for more plants. so they're able to, you know, grow their plant collection. And you can exercise in the pool, and it's also a nice place to hang out with your friends, to have parties and stuff like that. And I think that their pool is probably a saltwater pool. It's not a chlorine pool. I don't know how many of you have ever gone to a saltwater pool. They're actually pretty nice. You just have to get used to like the salt. It is the ocean basically. The upkeep is different. It's basically like you have the ocean in your backyard without the sand. I enjoyed the saltwater pools that I have gone to, and it doesn't ruin your hair, so there's that. One more thing about me in regards to my builds is that I always spend time afterwards at the end of everything, making sure that everything is centered and that they're all in their correct positions. You'll probably see me making sure that all of the lights, all of the lamps are centered in the room, and I go back and forth and look through all different angles just to make sure that everything is spot on. It would really bother me if I found something that was misplaced. So I do go through this extra effort of just going through everything that I've done and making sure that I didn't miss anything and that it's all symmetrical and nice. But yeah, that's the build. As I mentioned, this is the last one of the shell challenge footage that I have from many years ago. I have completely run out of footage now. So I'm thinking about what I should do for the future. Maybe I can make my own builds, maybe I can make my own shell challenge. Obviously there's lots of other people who are still doing shell challenges and I could look into that as well. But I want to know what you guys are interested in. Would you be interested in following me along as I build, or do you like this kind of voiceover scenario where you just see the speed builds? Are you interested in other types of challenges? Write down in the comments what you think, what your opinion is, what your interests are. I am back from my vacation. I actually came back from my vacation in the beginning of February, but then life just happened and I had work to do. I was completely filled to the brim with things to do. Obviously being away from home for 2 months basically, and this vacation was definitely not supposed to last that long. Problems happen and you know, you don't have control. But I am interested in making this channel grow. So to make that happen, I need to know what the public wants. Of course, I can make stuff that I like, but I also want to engage you guys and I want to bring happiness to your lives, and having your opinion will definitely help me to plan the future of this channel. But anyways, I hope you liked this video, and even if you don't write anything in the comments, I hope that you are enjoying the videos that you have watched from me. Stay tuned for more Sims content. I also love to play Papa's games and things like that, so you might find that interesting as well, as I'm working on more Sims 4 related videos. So yeah, thanks for being here and I hope to see you next time. Bye bye!